Здравствуйте, дорогие ребята! Дистанционная образовательная программа «Обо всем на английском» Центра «Радость» – это замечательная возможность совместить приятное с полезным, послушать прекрасные музыкальные произведения, отправиться в путешествие по страницам истории отечественной и мировой культуры и одновременно попрактиковаться в восприятии английской речи. Хорошо, если в ходе занятий вы будете повторять как знакомые, так и новые для вас английские слова, фразы и выражения. Занятия скомпонованы так, что для этого у вас будут все возможности. Премьеры видеозанятий будут проходить по воскресеньям раз в 2 недели, но смотреть их можно в любое удобное время. Главное, не забывайте каждый раз регистрироваться в анкетах Яндекс.Формы, ссылки на которые найдете в описании каждого ролика. Занятия программы «Обо всем на английском» разделены на циклы. По итогам каждого цикла вам будет предложено потренироваться в прохождении тестирования, проверить знания новых английских слов, терминов, выражений, ответить на вопросы на английском языке. Тестирование можно проходить трижды для достижения наилучшего результата. Пройдя тесты всех модулей программы, в конце учебного года вы получите итоговый сертификат Judge of Art, что значит ценитель, знаток искусства. Итак, дорогие друзья, настройтесь на восприятие английской лексики и приготовьтесь к нашему новому увлекательному путешествию.
Chinese,
Millennium,
Imperial,
Beijing,
Southern,
Northern,
West, East, multi-leveled, Harmony, Island, Lake.
Hello, dear friends! Today we are going on a journey to beautiful gardens and parks around the world. Our meeting is about the culture of the East. We will travel to China and discover the unique and magnificent beauty of the Chinese garden. Chinese culture dates back several millennia and differs from European culture. China is one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. The history of this country is about 5,000 years old. Chinese civilization has given us many great inventions, from gunpowder and porcelain to silk, paper, and tea. The specific features of Chinese culture can be seen in the traditions of the garden layout. Chinese gardens are huge in size, amazing in design, and reflect the philosophy and the worldview of the Chinese people. Wonderful, marvelous gardens are filled with harmony, silence, and contemplation, and at the same time with bright colors. Let's listen to the poem by the Chinese poet Yin Zheng to get an impression of this atmosphere. When winter lingers near to coming spring, the snow still flies as plum trees start to bloom. Winds howl and petals fall with the snow, but they will never melt in the warming sun. Leaves unfold and footprints lead to them. Blossoms multiply, bending branches down. Today's are not the same as yesterday's, and they are even lovelier at dusk than they were at dawn. The art of gardening appeared in China in ancient times. The first gardens appeared in the south of China and then spread all over the country. The gardens of the south were an extension of the house and were small in size, while the gardens of the north were huge. They were magnificent and so large that the houses seemed tiny. Despite these differences, all Chinese gardens share a common idea and similar visual design. A garden in China is not just a place of beauty and fun, but a kind of philosophy. In addition, the Chinese have learned to imitate nature so that the beauty of the created artificial landscapes is almost natural and yet breathtaking. Chinese gardens are divided into three main categories: imperial gardens, private gardens, temple and monastery gardens. They differ in size, themes, and features. Have a look at the Imperial Garden in the Forbidden City in Beijing, Yuhan. Its history began around 1420, together with the history of the Imperial Palace or Qinjinshan, which means Forbidden City. It was home to the imperial family and their servants. Anyone who entered it without permission faced the death. The garden is small but very picturesque. It differs from the usual garden as there are no large rose bushes or fruit trees. Yuhan is a collection of rare stones and unusual trees. The mountain of accumulated elegance is a composition of rare stones, and it is one of the largest in China. Such stones were very expensive in the Middle Ages. Only the emperor could afford a stone of this size. Inside the garden, we can see several small pavilions and summer houses. The members of the imperial family rested here and wrote poetry. There were also classes and discussions with teachers there. Private gardens in China appeared later than imperial gardens. Among private gardens, Suzhou gardens are well known for their elegance and complexity. Trade used to flourish in this city. Gradually, Suzhou became the largest and richest city in the south of the Yangtze River. Also, Suzhou had unique natural landscape features. The canals and small rivers within the city provided plenty of water for the gardens. They were not only the part of a beautiful urban landscape, but also served as a useful means of transport. The Italian traveler Marco Polo, who visited China in 1276, called this city the Chinese Venice. Gardens in China have always been closely linked to painting, poetry, and calligraphy, so Suzhou became an attractive destination for merchants, artists, and poets, who had also played their part in the development of Chinese garden art. Suzhou gardens are masterpieces of the southern style in Chinese garden art. Such gardens differ from the northern gardens, which are mainly represented by the imperial gardens. They have more modest layout and architecture, as well as the perfect balance of the elements common to all Chinese gardens: stones, water, flowers, and trees. According to UNESCO, the gardens of Suzhou represent the development of Chinese landscape garden design over more than 2,000 years. When you enter the garden, you just freeze in amazement. flowers and trees hiding paths, artificial slides with the images of ancient Taoist calligraphy, elegant bridges, pavilions, and flowing streams. Hence another name for Suzhou's landscape gardens, city mountains, and groves. Let's take a closer look at a few of these gardens. In total, Suzhou has about 60 gardens left from different periods of China's history. Each of these periods, also called eras in China, influenced architectural trends in its own way. Humble Administrator's Garden is one of the best examples of private garden architecture. This garden was built in the early 16th century by Wang Changcheng, a former administrator. It took 16 years for Mr. Wang to turn his garden into a place of peace and calm. The garden takes its name from the classical character, a humble administrator, who devoted himself to gardening, from an idle life by the poet Yun Pan. I enjoy a carefree life by planting trees and building my own house. I irrigate my garden and grow vegetables. Such a life makes me happy after my retirement. This piece of writing described Wang Changcheng's own desire to hide from the busy social life in his garden. The garden was laid out in a large swampy area. However, the area was not drained, and instead of series of pools were constructed, and small islands were created from the rest of the land. Although only the central part of the original park has survived, Humble Administrator's Garden is still considered one of the most picturesque and elegant ensembles of garden architecture, not only in China, but also in the world. One of the principles of the man-made landscape of that period is the so-called view from afar. Although Humble Administrator's Garden is one of the largest in Suzhou, the techniques used here are the same as for small gardens, where it was necessary to expand the space artificially. The garden usually consists of several sections divided and connected by walls, galleries, bridges, and ponds. Walls, planting, and buildings create a kind of a curtains that visually deepen the space. The paths and bridges were built in such a way that the space could be seen from different viewpoints. This extended the journey through the garden. Lion Grove Garden is located nearby. This park was founded in 1342 by the Zen Buddhist monk Wen Tanju. The small garden is famous for its stone labyrinth of bridges, passages, and grottos, which is located in the center of the park. The garden got its name from this labyrinth. The carved stones and rocks are shaped like lions. The size of the park is indeed quite small compared to Humble Administrator's Garden. Here, as in all classical Chinese gardens, there are trees, pavilions, and summer houses, water and stones. The gardens in monasteries and temples were also quite large, but modest and natural. The Chinese have historically enjoyed the beauty of nature. The line between the natural and the man-made in such gardens is very conventional. It is sometimes impossible to understand where it is. When they design such parks, the architects follow two key rules. Do no harm. Do not destroy the existing harmony. Try to make the park comfortable for visitors. The golden age of park art in China was in the 17th and 18th centuries. It was during this time that two main types of gardens became popular: private gardens and magnificent parks at imperial palaces and temples. Parks gradually became the part of the daily life of Chinese people. The film The Curse of the Golden Flower shows the magnificence and majesty of the imperial garden. Chinese artists and musicians found inspiration for their art in the gardens. Nobles spent their free time here practicing calligraphy, so it influenced Chinese art. There appeared painting genres based on images of birds, plants, and mountains. Wen Wei, the founder of monochrome, meaning one-color painting, is the most important representative of early Chinese ink-wash painting. The gardens of China were influenced by the two major religions of the East, Taoism and Buddhism. In the earliest descriptions, Chinese gardens are similar to paradise, which differs little from the Bible's Eden. So, in the philosophical work of Heinzi of the 2nd century BC, there is a story about the legendary hanging gardens of Sampu. Here, all year round, it's warm, streams are clear, and fantastic animals live here. The unusual shape of the pumpkin has served the Chinese as one of the images of independent and universal world. Chinese ancient gardeners and architects had also tried to create the image of the whole world in the garden landscape. In European culture, the garden was a symbol of heaven on earth too. As the Chinese religion of Taoism spread, the ideas of paradise and therefore of the ideal garden changed. The garden was not just a beautiful place, but also the place of the immortal. The Taoists believed that for spiritual balance it was necessary to refuse the comforts, pleasures, and entertainments of urban life and return to nature. In order to have the knowledge of eternal life, ancient rulers built artificial mountains in the gardens and terraces to attract immortals to the gardens. There are 4 basic rules for the traditional Chinese garden. First, the ideal Chinese garden must have a pond with 1 or more islands, a pavilion, and an artificial mountain. The Chinese believed that a mountain could underline the beauty of a lake. But it is impossible to have a real mountain in the garden, so the Chinese garden has an artificial mountain, Tianshan. It reminds a well-known mountain, Kunlun. In Chinese mythology, it is also the home of gods and sacred animals. In the Chinese garden, everything must be created by human hands. The size and the height of artificial mountains depend on the size of the garden itself. Sometimes it's just a small stone structure, Sometimes it's a labyrinth with caves and passages. For example, in the painting Trees and Valleys of Mount Yu, we can see an imaginary landscape with mountains. The mountains were made by Chinese craftsmen from large stones of various shapes set together with limestone. The stones of volcanic origin lifted from the bottom of the Lake Tahoe were ideal. Stones were one of the main decorations in the Chinese garden. Like statues in European gardens, stone is associated with the male energy yang, while water is associated with the female energy yin. Together, they make a harmonious whole. Water and ponds are also an important part of the Chinese garden. From huge man-made lakes to elegant small ponds, water is the major element of the garden composition. Water bodies created by gardeners must be as close to nature as possible. Water flows slowly, calmly, gracefully through the different parts of the garden, through a variety of landscapes. The second rule for the Chinese garden is the correct layout of the buildings in the garden. In the Chinese garden, there are mainly pavilions, summer houses, and corridors. They were not only a place to hide from the southern sun and rain, but also a place to admire the beauty of the garden. Pavilions were built as close to the water as possible, and summer houses were built on hilltops. The main thing was that the buildings should look natural. That is why summer houses and pavilions either had no walls or had huge floor-to-ceiling windows. The Chinese garden is full of greenery. This is the third rule in the Chinese garden, and it is neither the emerald lawns of the French park nor the monotonous greenery of the English garden. There are thousands of shades of green in the Chinese park. Gardeners choose a variety of plants, from coniferous trees, pines, firs, and junipers, to deciduous trees, plums, peaches, magnolias, willows, cherries, and apples. In spring, trees bloom and make the garden brighter. Fruit look very tasty. The layout of the plants and flowers was planned in detail. For example, the banana tree was planted near the garden owner's office. The banana tree is small and has very long leaves. In rain, the sound of water running off the banana leaves was supposed to tune in to work. The blooming tree was often next to the stone, which brought about the poetic thoughts about the passage of time. Bushes and trees were shaped and trimmed. The bonsai, ball-like plants, is the part of Chinese garden philosophy. The Oscar-winning film by Chan Yimou, House of Flying Daggers, shows us the greenery and bamboos which are typical for the traditional Chinese garden. You will certainly see orchids and delicate lotus flowers on the surface of the pond, which are symbols of purity for the Chinese. And finally, the fourth rule of the Chinese garden is that it is multi-leveled and simple at the same time. Chinese architects had many ways of creating the sense of infinity in the garden, but the main way to draw the visitor's attention to the particular landscape is to create different passages from one part of the park to another. Most often, this is an arch in the wall that separates different areas of the garden. Sometimes there are vase-shaped passages which are a decorative element. Every detail of the garden landscape created the right psychological mood. For example, ponds gave a sense of relaxation. The water in them was calm and still. It was believed that such water was able to store energy chi and give it back to those who admired it. There were cups in the water, which also have a special place in the Chinese culture. In China, the seasons change gently but with a great effect. Let's travel to the northwest of Beijing to see the Chinese garden at its best. Here, at the foot of the mountains, there is a masterpiece of Chinese garden art, Yuhuan, which can be translated as Garden of Nurtured Harmony. It was the former summer residence of the Qing dynasty and is one of the most beautiful places in Beijing and the largest existing imperial park in modern China. This park is well known not only in China but all over the world. It is a World Heritage Site. The park is famous for its gigantic size. It covers about 290 hectares. Wanshanshou Mountain, located in the northern part of the park, covers about a quarter of the area, and Kamenhu Lake, located to the south of the mountain, covers about 3/4. In the past, this lake played an important role in the water supply of Beijing and was used as the waterway between the city and its suburbs. Yuhuan has a long history. The park knew both periods of luxury and glory and periods of almost complete ruin and desolation. Even before the Lian and Jin dynasties built their residence, the park was used for outdoor walks and entertainment for the imperial family. The emperors liked the place so much that later, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, they decided to build a luxurious imperial park here. As for the dark moments in the history of Yuhuan Park, this park suffered almost total desolation during the invasion of British and French troops. The foreign soldiers scraped the gold from ancient sculptures, destroyed priceless paintings, robbed libraries, and demolished ancient monuments. Many pavilions, summer houses, and temples were burnt down and completely destroyed. Now the park is undergoing more development. Many of the buildings have been rebuilt. At the entrance, we are greeted by traditional Chinese sculptures of lion and lioness. Even in Chinese modern art, lions are very important. For example, the paintings by a contemporary Chinese artist, Xie Beiheng, depict lions as rulers of the world. The main part of the huge number of buildings, and there are about 3,000 of them in the park, is located on Mount Wansheng. In the Chinese tradition, they have beautiful poetic names: the Hall of Good Governance, the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Joy and Longevity, the Pavilion of Orchids, the Hall of Dispelling Clouds, and many other pavilions. The mountain offers a spectacular view of the whole Yuhuan and Kumihu Lake. To the west you can see the Western Mountains, and to the east you can see Beijing. On the west slope of Wansheng Mountain, there is a stone ship called Qingyangfang. It is a huge marble boat. According to the legend, this boat symbolized the eternal life of the Qin dynasty. Walk across a picturesque bridge, and you will get to Naihudao Island, South Island, located in the middle of the lake. There are buildings around the island, including Dragon King's Temple and the Hall of Modesty, as well as other buildings, adding a fairy tale look to the island. You can take a boat trip around the lake. The further from the shore, the better you can see the beauty of the park as a whole. There are dozens of large and small buildings in the greenery, delicate bridges over the canals, temples and towers, and a huge lake shining in the sun. Our today's trip to the east discovered the amazing beauty of the Chinese park, one of the most brilliant, beautiful and majestic examples of it is Yuhuan Park in Beijing, the former summer imperial residence. There are many other exciting gardens and parks with their unique features. See you later!